In the last two videos, which you can find in the playlist here, we went over what happened leading up to the arcs, including the discovery of Element, the wars that followed, and humanity's solutions. Then we talked about the 3 arcs that we see up close in the story, including Scorched Earth, Aberration, and with a very brief mention of the island. In this third video though, I'm diving deep into the OG island map, and namely the 4 characters that have a significant influence on the discoveries of the arcs, strange features, politics of tribe negotiations, the eventual ascension of key characters, and how they affected the other arcs. This series has been really fun so far, and I do hope you're enjoying it. If you end up liking this video, smash that like button and subscribe for more. Thank you to these lovely people for helping. Also, this video is sponsored by G-Portal, which I'll talk more about at the end, but without further ado, let's get right into it. Allow me to introduce you to an arc with a habitat that mimicked the conditions of a multi-biome island. This is where we meet 4 important survivors: Helena Walker, an Australian biologist from the 21st century, Sir Edmund Rockwell, a chemist of the 19th century, Li Mei-Yin, an ancient Chinese warrior all the way from the Han Dynasty time period, and Gaius Marcellus Nerva, a Roman centurion who had previously lived during the conquests of the Roman Empire. These survivors, over time, established friendships and bitter rivalries, meeting many other tribes on the island, such as the Painted Sharks, Iron Brotherhood, and the Black Thumbs. Though Nerva's army, the New Legion, was by far the most important, setting into motion the adventures of the 4 survivors. Speaking of these survivors, they represent these sort of symbolic pillars of ARK's gameplay. Helena Walker represents the discovery of new things at a basic level, sort of as a blank slate, much like players when they're starting out. Rockwell represents the sort of experimental and sometimes unethical scientists that are maybe in some of us, particularly when we sacrifice our dinosaurs. Mei-Yin represents the taming and protecting of creatures and various settlements. And last, Nerva is a man who represents what could be considered the embodiment of the psychological engineering that is the appeal of the knock down someone else's sandcastle game design of ARK's PvP. Before we get into the prime meat and savouroot of these characters' stories though, keep in mind once you finish this video, you should check out my series ARK: The Survival Stories for cinematic film-like representation of the story of the game. With that said, Helena and Rockwell, the 2 scientists, discovered at a pivotal moment that the arcs were unnatural. Helena grew to be fascinated by the creature imbalance and strange environmental abnormalities such as the obelisks. Among the island's abnormalities, inside caves scattered in various biomes, were tokens left behind, which they called artifacts. Rockwell focused heavily on these said artifacts. The artifacts were put on the arcs to act as keys, allowing survivors to take on the different guardians through the use of the obelisks. These guardians are in fact what we fight in the game as survivors ourselves. On the other side of the coin, Mei-Yin and Nerva are the 2 characters who become enemies after they crossed paths in battle. Mei-Yin was a mercenary on the island who tamed creatures to aid in her protection missions of convoys and villages. Nerva was a tyrannical leader that carried over his values from the ancient Roman Empire and wanted to conquer the entire arc by means of dominating any tribes who opposed his own. At some point, Edmund Rockwell was recruited to Nerva's army, which offered favorable benefits for the chemist. Fast forwarding a bit, Helena was with Mei-Yin, negotiating with her for help to take down one of the 3 guardians, the Megapithecus. Nerva, after catching wind of Mei-Yin's whereabouts, marched towards the Blue Obelisk and caught them off guard right as they were teleporting back from the fight. His army slaughtered all but one of Mei-Yin's creatures and captured Helena in the process. Mei-Yin's raptor, Wutsue, was the last creature she had left, and he carried her to safety away from Nerva and his men, dying shortly afterwards in a valiant attempt to protect her from assailing dinosaurs. Mei-Yin's raptor, Wutsue, was the last creature she had left, and then he was gone too. Filled with rage, Mei-Yin swore to kill the man whose actions resulted in the death of her friend, and she pursued. After Mei-Yin arrived at the Red Obelisk, Nerva had just returned from the Dragon Arena after he promptly killed it. Rockwell was doing a great job at manipulating Nerva and his army to seek out the power of the obelisks, falsely promising him that they would give him some sort of grand power. It was at that point that Helena was forced to guide Nerva to the cave in the volcano, which she suspected would take the artifacts retrieved from defeating the Guardians as tribute for opening its mysterious door. Rockwell, still with Nerva, hid his presence from Helena amongst his army, seething with fury that his fellow friend, a scientist and colleague, had supposedly betrayed him by studying the obelisks with Mei-Yin instead, who he had significant prejudice against, as he was under this false rumor that Mei-Yin was some sort of cannibal barbarian. After arriving at the volcano, Nerva and his army, including Rockwell, ventured into the cave, making their way to the Ark's Hall of History and subsequent Overseer Arena. The observation deck hovered over the Ark itself, being atop one of the 3 gigantic pillars bordering it. Nerva's army was completely depleted in the following battle against the Overseer, leaving only him and Rockwell left alive. As Nerva mourned the loss of his men, an apathetic Edmund Rockwell was fixated on the metal lining of the walls of what he later called the Starlit Sanctuary. The place was made of element. Hailing from the 19th century, though, he had no clue what element was, nor what it was capable of, or the fact that it was the very reason he had been placed onto the island itself. Waiting to learn more about this enamoring resource, he attempted to investigate one of the nearby terminals, but ended up ascending to an entirely different Ark in the process. Shortly after Nerva and his men entered the tech cave, Mei-Yin, still stalking the group, found Helena tied up outside the cave entrance and rescued her, insisting they follow suit after him. When they teleported into the station from inside the cave, they discovered the bodies of Nerva's men and creatures, but no sign of Rockwell or Nerva himself. This caused Helena to try and persuade Mei-Yin into showing him mercy, but Mei abruptly knocked her unconscious to prevent her from interfering. After abandoning Helena, she searched for Nerva further, eventually finding and wounding the Centurion with her blade. For once, he ran, causing Mei-Yin to give chase and attack him once more. It was in this confrontation that she accidentally damaged a terminal, which caused both her and Gaius to ascend. Helena, being the last survivor in the control station who hadn't ascended, was faced with a multitude of questions and answers. She eventually found her way to a console and started messing with it.
I don't have the answers to any of these questions or the dozens of others that kept popping into my head. But somehow, I mean to find out. Somehow, I'll find the truth.
Raya, decades after losing her lover John, and living in the sweltering desert heat alongside her wyverns long enough to look like a raisin, saw 2 differently timed beams of light in the distance. These pillars of light were a result of both Rockwell and Helena's ascensions. Raya arrived at the first pillar too late to track whoever came from it, Rockwell, but was able to successfully track Helena from hers. Raya was curious since, even in her old age, she had never seen this before. All the while, Rockwell and Helena, both in different locations of the desert, did whatever they could to survive in such a drastically different environment from what they were used to on the island. Rockwell, in his old age, almost felt the intense heat of the desert, but he found a nearby religious settlement that nursed him back to health. Helena also found a group, specifically a convoy, to keep her company and help her stay alive. After studying the local fauna and flora of the desert Ark, Helena came to the realization of how the Arks kept people in their borders, besides the giant force fields, of course. She theorized that, like the island, scorched earth had a natural deterrent at its borders. On the island, this was the ocean, which mostly stopped people from trying to escape. Scorched Earth's deterrent was the endless dunes, which were home to deathworms. These things would devour anyone trying to leave the central desert. Now, while Helena was thinking about the borders and everything, Rockwell, on the other hand, was focused on the element he had seen in the Starlit Sanctuary, which he dubbed Edmundium, because he's a complete narcissist, spending most of his time on Scorched Earth, deceiving or outright murdering anyone he had to in order to get Scorched Earth's Hall of History. He robbed the previously mentioned religious tribe, which had helped him, stealing their 3 artifacts, which they were particularly obsessed with. These people literally worshipped the artifacts, but didn't actually know what they did. Artifacts in hand, Rockwell got as far away from Prophet's arrest as he could, and promptly discovered that the obelisks only required the 3 artifacts he now had. All he needed now was to find someone strong enough to defeat whatever beast lied in store. He eventually encountered another settlement, though this one was being raided by another tribe, the Burning Phoenix, which resulted in his capture. While captured, Rockwell tended to the other prisoners' injuries to stop their whining. The guards took notice, and as it turned out, the leader of this tribe's wife was pregnant. But they were going to make Rockwell deliver the baby, whether he liked it or not. Now, while Helena and Rockwell were doing all this crazy shit on Scorched Earth, you might be wondering what happened to Mei-Yin and Nerva. Let's talk about that briefly before we continue with Scorched, since it happened roughly at the same time. Like I said earlier, Mei, in the process of slaying Nerva, activated one of the terminals, which caused the Ascension process, which sent the 2 survivors both to the aberrant Ark, the one Diana, Santiago, and the rest of the tech tribe royally screwed up. Luckily, Mei-Yin and Nerva landed on the surface at night, so they weren't immediately cooked. Not that this mattered for Nerva, though he was dead. Mei-Yin sustained a pretty dope scar from her battle with Nerva, and while she was bandaging it up, the sun began to rise. She looked over at him and noticed he was cooking. More than cooking, though, his corpse was on fire. Saying this, she ran for her life. Somehow, despite her armor smoking, she survived and stumbled into a nearby cave. Alone again, Mei-Yin explored the caverns of aberration, taming various creatures like a shinehorn she named Xiao, a ravager named Shi, which later died while Mei was knocking out a rock drake with trike arrows, and said rock drake, which she named Aoyue after taming. Look, the ARK story isn't always consistent with gameplay. It kind of does this a lot, but the Beast Queen is in fact a beast. Time passed after Mei-Yin tamed Aoyue, and she realized she wasn't alone in the caverns. Someone had left unnatural footprints, and after investigating them carefully, she was discovered by members of the Tech Tribe. She didn't trust their intentions at first, but they offered her shelter, and she eventually agreed to come to their camp with some convincing from a certain ginger pilot. After arriving at their settlement, Mei discovered their tech city and was in awe, particularly because Mei is from ancient China, and these people were wearing glowing armor. Mei-Yin's stay was initially reluctant since she felt extremely disconnected from the others and their technology, not just because she hailed from a time long before her peers, but because she had convinced herself she didn't belong due to her beast-like nature. Ever since her time on the island, she had synergized more with dinosaurs than people, being unfairly pushed away and feared by other tribes. This gave her a sort of identity crisis, which the orange-haired woman, Diana, helped her break out of. She was the only one Mei really felt a connection with in the Tech Tribe, and she taught her how to use their armor in an effort to get her to stay. It worked. So well, in fact, that Mei soon began to surpass Diana with said armor. It's safe to say the two grew pretty close, so when Diana was in danger on an impossible mission to gather element shards from the deepest parts of aberration, Mei dashed to her aid. The mission to get the shards went really bad, and everyone except Diana and her friend Halstead were killed quickly. Mei met up with them and joined the excursion towards the element shards, causing them to eventually rest in a nearby camp. In the middle of the night, though, Halstead had a baby. Congrats!
Oh, sweet mother of God! What the fuck?
So, with Mei and Diana being the only ones left alive, they made one last attempt to grab the shards so the mission wouldn't be a complete failure. They got it, but Aoyue died because there were just too many freaking Reapers, man. They made it back to the base, and Diana gave Mei-Yin a necklace. Totally out of appreciation, not a massive crush or anything. Totally. Leaving aberration for now, and on a high note, trust me, it won't be later, we catch back up with the scorched survivors. Helena was finding even more bizarre and unnatural creatures, such as a rock golem that split her from her initial group, a little jerboa friend she named Radar who could predict the weather, and giant fucking mantises that she helped fend off shortly after joining up with a larger settlement that taught her how to shoot guns. Amidst the battle, Helena saw Wali al-Aswad from afar, an enigmatic entity considered by most in the desert to be a sort of heavenly guardian. Sound familiar? Helena was curious, so she left the village with a Morellatops and Radar in search of Wali, since she had a hunch the mysterious person would be able to answer the questions she had about the ARKs. Around the same time, Rockwell was also in search of something. Goddamn element, which he finally got a sample of after convincing the Burning Phoenix tribe to fight the Manticore, just like how he more or less convinced Nerva to fight the dragon back on the island. He secretly stashed the element sample and then poisoned the Burning Phoenix tribe before sneaking off into the night. His actions here probably killed the wife of Timur, the leader of the clan, and the newborn child that Rockwell delivered. Rockwell could kill as many babies as he needed if it meant he could have some alone time with his Edmundium. Anyways, Helena climbed a whole mountain to find the legendary Wali al-Aswad, and when she finally collapsed from exhaustion, Helena heard a woman laughing with bemused. Wali al-Aswad, or as you should know, Raya, the woman whose story I told previously, was waiting there for Helena. The two of them discussed the ARKs, and when Helena told her about what she knew about the ARKs, Wali wasn't surprised. It was as if she had seen a whole lot herself. Wali told Helena about some of her experiences on the ARK, even letting Helena study her wyverns. Eventually, Wali and Helena found Rockwell wandering around in the desert, having just grossly inflated his fucking kill-death ratio, and Helena was just like, "Oh my god, it's my best mate!" And Rockwell was like, "Holy shit, this lady's a fucking devil, she betrayed me!" Both of them were completely off from the truth, obviously. Wali didn't trust Edmund, though, mentioning the fact that she saw another beam materialize sometime before Helena's farther away. Rockwell somehow not only played this fact off as some sort of time travel, but he also convinced Helena that he heard she got captured back on the island and went out to negotiate her release with Nerva. Eventually, Helena and Rockwell convinced Wali to take them to where they could ascend and escape the desert ARK. It turned out that said place was in the Colosseum of another long-ruined city, the same one John sacrificed himself in. Please, a moment of silence for John Dakea. Helena left Radar in Wally's possession knowing she'd be in better hands, and with a heartfelt goodbye, Wally finally opened up and told Helena her real name, Raya.
I have seen so much since we last spoke, John. There are secrets in this desert that you would never believe. Know that I will carry on. Yours, always, Raya.
Within the ARK, Helena and Rockwell couldn't decide where to go next. Helena wanted to go back to the island, seeing as they knew people there, but Rockwell was interested in going somewhere else, an ARK containing pools and rivers of molten Edmundium for his taking. Rockwell was like,
Ooh, that one has fatty Edmundium on it. Should we go?
and Helena was like, we should go back to the island, people know us.
That wasn't a question, Helena.
With Helena not wanting to leave Rockwell behind, they chose Aberration. And that is where I'll stop this video. If you enjoyed our third part of the ARK lore summary series, smash that like button and subscribe to my channel and hit the bell notification too and all that. Also, as I mentioned, this video is sponsored by Gportal, which is an amazing server provider that I use myself to host my 12-map ARK cluster on PC. If you'd like to get your own servers, go ahead and use my code with the link in the description below to get 10% off your next purchase. I need to give a huge thanks, of course, to the 3 lovely, knowledgeable ARK lore nerds who helped out with this video, including Chaos, Redgear17, and Stelium. In the next lore video, I'll be covering the full rest of ARK's story of Aberration, but before that, stay tuned for our long-awaited machinima film of the Aberration Survival Stories, Part 2, releasing February 12th, 2023.
My discovery. I can see my Edmund. I can feel it. I ascend.